David, from your perspective, what are the most pressing challenges facing the transportation infrastructure industry today, such as we hear about funding all the time, not having enough resources to do the work, those types of things? What do you see as the most effective way to deliver projects more efficiently and resiliently?
Right now, I think we're at a crossroads in the transportation industry. Project budgets don't go as far as it did 5 years ago. So as an example, iron and steel prices are up 54% over the last 5 years, right? And 9.2% just in the past year alone. So that makes it really challenging.
Did you know that the U.S. faces a multi-trillion-dollar shortfall in funding and delivery capacity for transportation infrastructure? That gap affects everything from our daily commutes to the strength of our economy, and it's reshaping how engineers plan, design, and deliver projects. In this episode, I'm joined by David Weiss, PE, Senior Vice President, National Business Line for Transportation and Infrastructure at WSP in the U.S., who will provide some great strategies on how engineers can build more efficient and resilient transportation systems, from modernizing project delivery to leveraging AI for smarter asset management. If you want to understand today's toughest infrastructure challenges and get a glimpse of what's coming next, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. Before we jump in, I want to tell you about our AEC PM Connect event, an interactive experience where civil engineers can sharpen their project management skills through real-world sessions on topics like earned value, AI in project management, and risk management. Visit aecpmconnect.com and register today. We currently have events in Kansas City and New Jersey, with more coming. I'm your host, James Taylor, and this is the Civil Engineering Podcast, the industry's leading show for civil engineering professionals, ranked as the #1 civil engineering podcast by FeedSpot. It's now time for our civil engineering conversation of the week with David Weiss, PE, Senior Vice President, National Business Line Executive for Transportation and Infrastructure at WSP in the U.S. David, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
David, I want to start off by if you could walk us through your career journey in civil engineering and how it's ended up for you to your current leadership role at WSP.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's been a very quick 31 years. Yeah, I graduated from Manhattan College, now Manhattan University here in New York. And it's kind of odd in today's world, probably. I've only worked at WSP my entire career. As a matter of fact, I interned at WSP when I first got out of school. So, I could say I prepared my resume once, which I know is a little unusual these days. I came out of school and I went into the bridge inspection world. I was out there climbing some of the biggest structures around the New York metro area, which, to be honest with you, looking back on those first few years, I'm quite fond of doing that kind of work. It's just you and the bridge, and you're out there and doing some fun stuff. It taught me a lot about understanding conditions of these structures and appreciating what you're seeing hands-on. From there, I came back into the office and started to work on design of those structures. And I thought some of that early hands-on inspections were really useful in order to develop, designs for rehab or replacement type of projects. From there, I PM'd a whole bunch of projects of different size and scale, mainly staying in the highway bridge realm. A bunch of years later, I started taking a little bit more of the business side of our business, the business management side of our business, and assumed the role of what was called at the time an area manager role, overseeing the profit and losses and business development for our Westchester County, New York office. Shortly thereafter, a couple of years later, I assumed the same role for New York City practice, which was a much larger practice, which also focused a lot more on the transit rail market. So that's when I started to get more immersed in the transit rail business. And about a year ago this time, as a matter of fact, September of 2024, I was some of the new role within the much larger organization as the national business line lead for transportation. So I oversee the end markets that works with our regions, and that would be aviation, transit rail, maritime, geotech and tunneling, complex bridges, as well as our geomatics team, our visualization team, and our digital delivery teams. So we're spread across the U.S. kind of if I could draw that comparison of when I first started, WSP in the US was only about 200 people. And now here we are, a firm of 77,000. So even though I've been with one firm all these years, it's grown dramatically.
Been a lot of changes over those 31
Oh,
years.
yeah.
That's great. David, from your perspective, what are the most pressing challenges facing the transportation infrastructure industry today, such as, we hear about funding all the time, not having enough resources to do the work, those types of things. What do you see as the most effective way to deliver projects more efficiently and resiliently?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a really great question. Right now, I think we're at a crossroads in the transportation industry. Even though we're still seeing historic investments through the bipartisan infrastructure law, but there's still a pretty big gap
Yeah.
between the funding available and how much we actually need. If you go back to March of this year when ASC rolled out their annual 2025 report card, you see U.S. infrastructure overall got a C grade. So yes, we're moving forward. Bridges and highways, transit aviation systems are all under a ton of pressure and they're aging, right? So, don't
Yeah.
forget federal funding, it typically needs to be matched by state or local agencies and that could be tough for those who are already stretched thin. And then, add on top of that, costs are, they're rising everywhere.
Yeah.
Inflation, supply chain issues, workforce shortages, they all mean that our project budgets don't go as far as it did 5 years ago. So as an example, iron and steel prices are up 54% over the last 5 years, right? And 9.2% just in the past year alone. So that makes it really challenging for our owners to make, the most out of every dollar. So,
Yeah.
all these pressures affect, every stage of the project delivery. So we're seeing it on the planning side all the way through to closeout. Owners, they're asking, how can we prolong service life? So agencies are talking more about asset management. They're asking, how do we get state of good repair kind of to be the focus? How can we stretch our budgets? How can we be more efficient? Are there new tools that we could use to cut costs? And at the end of the day, it's about, finding ways to do, more with less. So, for this reason, a lot of our agency partners are looking into technology, applying digital tools. They're looking for ways to improve project delivery, manage their assets. So it helps them to understand the condition of their infrastructure and just to make smart decisions about spending, utilizing, and how to utilize those tools to do that.
Yeah, so I guess at the end of the day, the thing that's most pressing is all of it is causing costs to go up. So funding
Yeah.
becomes even more important because you're talking about, hey, we don't have the staff to do it. Okay, we're going to transition technology. All of that has costs that's associated with it. Your rise in cost, your steel costs, your raw materials is causing the funding to go up as well. So I mean, at the end of the day, that's one of the toughest things to struggle with. And I guess it's no matter what level of government you're at, right? You're at the federal, the state, the county, local, whatever that might be. There's still going to be that funding gap at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're seeing it and we're seeing it. We're asking, clients are coming to us saying, hey, look, I budgeted this project years ago. I'm not getting the same project, for what I originally thought I can get. So they're having to make some tough decisions. What can I do with our scope that could still bring me the intended results, but recognizing that I might have to make some hard decisions on what we want it to look like at the end of the day. So we've seen some descoping. We're seeing some changes and some thoughts around how could we be more efficient around it. So it is real.
So modernizing project delivery has been a growing focus in civil engineering. How do you see these innovations like digital tools? You talked a little bit about technology, AI, and new delivery models transforming the way transportation projects are being executed.
Yeah, that's where we are right now. Things are changing pretty quickly. It's funny. I can look back on my career. We're seeing a big shift from the old school paper drawings, right, and static reports to what I'd like to say are living information models. So this is moving quickly. Digital twins, as an example, they bring together BIM and GIS and even like sensor data into one place. So owners, designers, contractors, they can collaborate more easily. It's, really more than just a design tool. Ultimately,
Yeah.
if we do our jobs right, these models, they become the the playbook, right, for the entire assets like life. And AI, it's adding a whole nother layer to it. So, and an example on the rail side, we're using AI to predict track failures from sensor and video data so we can plan maintenance before there's a
Hmm.
problem. That means fewer service disruptions, better safety. The DOTs in the US, they're starting to use, similar predictive tools, for pavements and bridges, for roadways. Adaptive and data-driven operations are really a great way to get started with AI. We've got machine learning systems optimizing traffic signals in real time, right? Which cut congestion and emissions, without even like laying any more concrete down, right? We're not adding
Yep.
lanes or capacity. So what I like to say is it's all about squeezing every bit of efficiency out of our corridor networks. And then on top of these types of tools, there's new collaborative delivery models that we're seeing more and more agencies lean into, like CMAR or CMGC, progressive design build, where we can get contractors involved much earlier in the design process. And this allows an approach where owners can manage risk, unlock those innovation solutions from the designer and contractor working together, offers more flexibility and alignment
Yeah.
with their priorities, and when you combine these types of delivery models with digital, designers can kind of test virtually their ideas, and contractors can share insights, and owners can see schedules and costs get optimized real time before construction starts.
Yeah, you mentioned digital twins in there, and can you talk a little bit about how that's impacting the transportation industry? I know one thing that I've heard, and I think you brought it up of like, hey, it's no longer just the static paper documents that are being, part of the construction documents, the full, CAD file, the BIM modeling, all of that stuff is included, and it allows it to be more of a I guess, hands-on approach versus just, "Here's my piece of paper." Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. And in the context of asset management, I think this is huge. So going back when I first started, we'd send out crews, right, every few years for inspections. They'd write up reports and fix what's broken, But that
Yeah.
old model isn't sustainable, right? Or it isn't necessary in today's world. So now with technology, we're moving to continuous monitoring and
Hmm.
using the predictive analytics to plan the long-term maintenance. So from a digital twin perspective, it takes it to a different level. So instead of just collecting sensor data, we're combining it with BIM models and drone imagery and inspection records, and that gives it gives us a like a dynamic model where engineers can run those what if scenarios, like what happens if we increase truckloads or
Mm.
delay repairs by a year. Now, having that kind of foresight means better planning and lower life cycle costs. So on the rail side, I'll give you an example. We've seen real progress, especially in Europe. We worked WSP on we worked with the Stockholm's transit agency to develop a data capture system, an asset management platform that lets the railroad and contractors see the entire network in 360-degree imagery and
Hmm.
on maps. And it consolidates the condition assessments, the inspection reports, the design documentation, and
Hmm.
real-time asset data is like overlaid onto that. So you're developing really a single source of truth, really.
Yeah.
So this kind of power makes coordination and planning so much easier, right? It dramatically improves the efficiencies and reliability of the Stockholm rail system. So, and we're seeing this kind of tech gain more traction in the US too.
So you started talking a little bit about asset management, and I love hearing about asset management. It seems like over the last so many years, we've really seen it be transformative. Where you were looking at just kind of more static, but the more assets you have, it becomes increasingly complex. And then you tie in the digital aspect, the AI. You started talking a little bit about how are you seeing technology changing the way transportation assets are being monitored, maintained, and optimized. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that technology now it's just moving at such a fast pace. At the end of the day, I'll say that it's as much as the models are going to be evolving and changing rapidly, but it's really the powers in the data. So if we can be able to have good data, if we have rich data sets, how we utilize that data is what it's going to be about. Because I feel that as models are going to continue to grow and evolve, but I think it's about how we, how good our data is and how we manipulate that data is going to make all the difference in the world.
So the term intelligent mobility is a term that's gaining momentum. What technologies or strategies do you see as being most impactful in building smarter, safer, and more efficient transportation solutions?
Yeah, it's great. I'm this is an area where I'm particularly focused. So first of all, let me define to me what intelligent mobility means.
Yeah.
So it's using digital tech to make transportation, really the movement of people and goods, safer, more efficient, inclusive, and sustainable. It's a huge topic. I mean, it's across all modes of transportation, really. When you think about intelligence, that's everything, right? From rail to freight to roadway networks. But let me just focus on the roadways just for the purpose of this conversation, because
Sure.
there's some really cool examples of how tech and data are making travel safer and streamlining the operations at the same time. So first up, I'll just talk about V2X, right? Vehicle to everything communication. So this is the future of safe, connected transportation, right? So, you know, V2X communications, that's a game changer for how we navigate the road. So if you can just picture this, cars and trucks, even pedestrians and traffic lights are all talking to each other in real time. So what
Hmm.
does that mean? Your vehicle could get instant updates, right, about a car turning ahead, a slick patch of pavement, or a signal that's about to go green. US DOT is really leaning into this technology. You're already seeing safety wins in pilot programs around the US. We are thankful that we're participating and helping in some of those pilot programs. But here's the thing: if we really want V2X to reach its full potential, we kind of need to go big. So that means rolling out these systems everywhere, making sure they're working together seamlessly and securely, no matter the device or the brand. The goal is smart connectivity, vehicles, mobile devices, roadside tech, all sharing the same data effortlessly, right? But also keeping personal information safe, and that's a really big element of that. So how we make roads smarter, safer, and ready for the future. So that's V2X, but I'd also like to talk a little bit about smart pavement.
Mm.
That's where the road itself gets smart. We've worked with agencies, right, installing embedded sensors and utilizing digital twins that monitor pavement health, and it tracks wear and tear and predictive maintenance needs. So in Colorado, we've supported pilots that use sensors to follow vehicle movement and environmental conditions, so the agencies can act before the problems start popping up, right? And to go a little further with that, we're also showing how smart pavement ties into like larger mobility systems. So as an example, using platforms for bridges and pavement management information systems together, we merge that data with that from radar and Wi-Fi sensors, weather stations, to create a real-time virtual view of roadways. This has been a huge success, especially in Ontario. We're doing a lot of that kind of work. It helps with predictive maintenance, but even more importantly, with emergency response and flood prevention. So it
Wow.
turns those static infrastructure into something that's adaptable and reliable, right? So
Yeah.
and then a third element that I think is important, just kind of speaking and staying on the theme of adaptability, you could talk about adaptive signal systems, right? Traffic lights that could quite literally think on their feet. So instead of running on fixed timings that don't really change, adaptive systems are constantly collecting data from sensors, cameras, connected vehicles on the road. They're analyzing what's happening and then making those adjustments automatically, right?
Interesting.
So cities have deployed these systems and
Wow.
seen meaningful reductions in congestion and traffic times. But you can imagine how beneficial this would be when you're looking forward to major events, right? We're talking about FIFA coming to the
Hmm.
US, Olympics coming to the US. So
Yeah.
these types of major events where you can have these adaptive systems at key intersections or throughout the quarter can really enhance safety and efficiency. So in California, we're helping to roll out adaptive ramp metering, and that reacts to real-time highway conditions using machine learning to fine-tune the capacities. So when you bring together all these things, the V2X, digital twins, adaptive signals, you're starting to turn intersections into intelligent like hubs
Right.
for mobility, right? And it reduces crashes, which is the key.
That's awesome. Those are some very exciting technologies. I mean, I think you mentioned it. One of the biggest things with that is data security, right? Because as those things become more data driven, the data security is super important to make sure that there's not hacks into the system or whatever else. But the one thing that I do love it, and it's something that I've said, is that the data that we get is great, but it's what are we doing with that data that really allows us to change the world, right? There's so
Yeah.
many data points on things out there, but if we're not utilizing that, like you're talking about here with adaptive signaling and roadway conditions and all that, like the stuff that you're collecting helps emergency management. Like that's exactly what that data is. It should be being utilized for, and it's great to hear that we're seeing more of that as the years go on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a data-rich environment right now, and so just capturing it and utilizing it right now is going to be it's going to be key. And this is where we're at. It's not even the future. This is happening today.
It's now, right?
So it's now. I mean, firms are starting to get their heads around this stuff, but it's out there, and it's just how can we capture it and utilize it?
So, David, WSP has had a strong reputation for leadership and infrastructure. What role do you believe leadership plays in driving innovation and addressing industry wide challenges in transportation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, first of all, leadership here is vital because it's evolving so quickly, like we talked about, right? So, I think it's critical for leaders in industry, in firms, outside firms, public agency. We're all of us have to really lead, and so the technology doesn't change the industry, on its own, right? It's going to take leaders to set the vision and build the right culture. And I
Hmm.
feel that culture is probably the most important word
Hmm.
with regard to this. So with tech evolving so quickly, it's important that we create an environment within our respective organizations where people feel safe, right, to
Yeah.
experiment and learn from the mistakes. So leadership, in my opinion, it means investing in your team. It's not just about buying the latest software. It's about retraining, for example, inspectors to become data analysts.
Hmm.
It's helping designers to see kind of the big picture. It's coaching PMs on how to take advantage of digital tools to make things run smoother. So I feel one important aspect regarding AI is that leaders, of course, we need to also be acting responsibly, right? Pairing the power that the machine learning
Hmm.
has with good engineering judgment. So setting those sort of ethical boundaries and guardrails and just always focusing on the outcomes like safety and sustainability, right?
Yeah, I like the one thing you said there about the innovation aspect of like, hey, we can't keep doing the same thing we've always done. We got to break those molds. That's where the innovation comes from. And as a business in the engineering industry, you have to allow for that innovation to take place. And I think the word you said is you got to try it and fail a little bit in order to see what success is there. And that's an important piece of it. Is some things aren't going to work, but you know, it's going to lead to the next piece.
Yes, absolutely. If we're not failing, we're not learning.
Yeah,
Plain and simple.
exactly. I love it. David, it's been a great conversation today. What's one final piece of advice you'd like to share with civil engineers who aspire to play a leading role in advancing transportation infrastructure in the years to come?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good one. My best advice, I would say they need to be multilingual, but not in the spoken language sense and sort of like the skills sense. So the next generation of transportation leaders, honestly, will need to speak engineering. They'll need to speak data and operations, but all at the same time.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean you have to be a data scientist, but you should know enough to ask good questions and check the answers. That would be one thing. The other is that because of the rapid movement of what we're seeing in technology today, they need to kind of build like a portfolio of small victories. Like You don't
Hmm.
need to wait for the $1 billion mega project.
Yeah.
I think you need to try pilots, put sensors on a bridge, to test adaptive signals on a discrete corridor, or run a digital sprint on a mid-size kind of job, track the results, look at it. And I think lastly, I'd say just remember this, like, buzzwords don't have an impact, the outcomes, focus on the outcomes. So like a
Yeah.
digital twin
Yeah.
that doesn't improve safety or cut
What's the
costs,
point?
it's just an
Yes.
expensive model. It's just an expensive.
Exactly.
So tying your tech to a goal, and if you keep outcomes as the North Star, you'll be leading the charge, man, not just reacting to the change.
Yeah, such a great point of, okay, if it just because it's digital or it's technology and it's splashy, what does it translate to the actual results of your project? Does it help? Does it not? And if it doesn't help, like, let's rethink that aspect of it, because
Great.
at the end of the day, we don't want it to just be there because it's there. It needs to actually be beneficial to everything that we're doing.
100%.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. To wrap things up, we're now going to transition into our civil engineering hot seat segment, where I'll ask David a rapid round of questions that will give you a glimpse into the daily habits, influences, and insights that has helped shape his career. Let's jump into it.
Strong leadership drives strong projects. Become an AEC PM professional and give your team the leadership skills they need to thrive. Customized PM development, premium content, and a leadership edge that sets you apart. Learn more at aecpm.com.
Now it's time for our CE hot seat segment of the week with David Weiss, PE. All right, David, you're officially in the civil engineering hot seat. You ready to go?
Ready to go.
All right, David, do you have any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, do you have a specific morning ritual, lunchtime ritual, things that you do daily that contribute to you being a successful professional?
All right, I'll break it down to two things that I think are critical, at least for myself, because it kind of keeps me balanced. Number one is at least 3 or 4 times a week, I carve out time and I make it very deliberate to go make sure I am going to the gym, right? I go to the gym, just to clear my head, and I feel strongly that strong body, strong mind kind of approach to things. So
Yeah.
I do make sure I carve out time for that to do some really good workouts. And then the companion to that is my sleep time ritual. Now this might seem a little crazy because I'm like fixated on it, because I firmly believe that you need quality and consistent sleep to perform, right? So I'm pretty like clockwork. I'll get to bed 9:30. I'm in bed. I'm reading a book, and I'm reading a book to just unwind. I'm not looking at my phone. It gets my eyes heavy. I put something calming on TV with a timer on, and I just make sure like I set the room in such a way where I can kind of drift off and try to sleep as well as I can and kind of clear my head, so the next day I could wake up and I feel recharged.
What is one book that you recommend to engineers regularly, or just one book that you found to be extremely helpful in your professional and or personal development?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I'm gonna pick one. And this might be a little usual, but I'm gonna tie it. I'm gonna tie it for you. So I would pick, and I've read this book twice. It's it's from Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right?
Mhm.
And that is a book from the 30s, but I think they just re-released it and for the digital age. But the reason why I think it's an important book for anyone to pick up, number one, it's still relevant, because our industry is still very relationship driven.
Mhm.
It's still, and so this book is all about how to improve interpersonal relationships, basically how to speak to people. And I feel that you kind of have to go backwards a little bit to be able to see how did people communicate, how to improve communication skills. It's very easy today. Everyone's typing away and communicating IM, they're communicating email. But
Mhm.
when you need to have those face-to-face changes, interactions with folks, I think this is a great book to help people realize, oh yeah, how do I ask open-ended questions? How do I do these types of things? And this book focuses on that. So I think it's a must read for anyone in our industry.
I love it. It is an absolutely great book. Thinking back on your managers of the past, picture your favorite manager or managers. What was it that made them your favorite?
Yeah. Okay. So I had, in 30 years, I really kind of had like two main like bosses, right? So for the first 20 years, I had Steve Smith. He's still with WSP, as a matter of fact. And he ran our legacy business, that WSP acquired way back in the day. and he was a driver. He really taught me a lot. And I'll just use as an example. I mean, the first couple of years of my career, when we used to send out like a lot of letters, we used to write letters. You go to clients, every letter I wrote went through Steve, and he redlined them to death. I mean, he redlined them like crazy. And I got to a point where I was like, I don't think I have a grasp of the English language if I'm getting this much redline for the first several years of my career. But you know what? It's funny because it started to dwindle down. It started less and less. And I just never forget the day when I handed him a letter. He read, he handed it back, and he goes, "This is good to go." And that was like a monumental part of my career.
Right.
Like, it's good to go. I've like crossed some kind of threshold. And so that was Steve. Like, he really was hard on me. And then 180, I had Jerry Giannetti for the last at least 10 years. Jerry just recently retired from WSP, and he couldn't be more opposite of Steve, but he brought a different aspect that I cling to. He was just this calming force. And he would, no matter how crazy or intense or project, challenges that were happening at any given time when people could easily unravel, it seems like Jerry got more calm. So what I kind of took from him was, hey, no matter what crisis that you think you're in right now, present yourself in a calm, collected way, and it kind of takes everyone, like a collective, that kind of takes them down a notch. So I've learned lessons from both management styles, and they're opposite of each other, but I think that they were additive. That makes sense.
I've got one final question, and that is the critical civil engineering career elevator advice question. If you got into an elevator with a civil engineering student and had about 30 to 40 seconds with them, what career advice would you share with them?
Okay, this is great. And I think this is kind of applicable regardless if it's civil engineering or anything. Don't be afraid to try something new. So if you feel like you're going to wait until you're ready for the next thing, or I'm ready for the next role, or I'm ready for the project, then you're probably too late. What I would just say is, if the door opens, even if just a little bit, you kind of need to shove your foot in it, and then don't be afraid to walk through it, because you're going to need to do that in your career, right? It's not always going to be the perfectly set up for you to come in and you feel ready. It's always going to be like taking a little bit of a leap of faith. And so long as you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, quite honestly, and you open your ears and listen, then you're going to do okay.
David, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Where can our listeners connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can reach out to me directly, and my email address is david.weiss, WEISS, at WSP.com, and that'd be the best way to get me. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and you can certainly connect and send me some IMs. I'd love to connect and talk more about this.
It was great talking with you today, David, and we do appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Please remember you can find the show notes for this episode at civilengineeringpodcast.com. There you'll find the summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during the episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all your civil engineering endeavors.